What is up, everybody? Welcome to the Football Forecast, episode 1 of the Football Forecast podcast. All right, my name is Austin Killough. I'm your host. I'm here with my co-host, my other host, Steve Killough.
Hey guys, what's going on?
And so this is it. This is our new show, Football Forecast, very first episode. And just, before we get into, all the things that we're going to do, during this show, a lot of this is going to be, an introduction to kind of give you guys a little bit of an idea of what we're going to be doing here and things like that. Because we know mostly everybody watching now is new from a new community because our last podcast, and we did do a podcast before this, but our last show or our last podcast was it was another show, and we were part of it for a while. It was a couple of months, and we were doing pretty good things there. We had a lot of episodes out, and we were making good progress. Had a good track record, talking about a lot of good information, putting out good content, here and there, and we had a big community built up. But this year, or not this year, but this new show that we're doing, was kind of out of a little bit of an accident that happened with that show. The management, just things like that, kind of forced us out a little bit. So we just kind of had to do our own thing regardless. We kind of just had to leave and part ways because we didn't feel, that show was going the way that we wanted it to go, that we thought, maybe we would have a little bit more success, doing it our own way, just doing it in a way that we think is morally and just all right, just good. And that's what we want to do. We want to bring a community to everyone, a football community that's honestly strictly football. We do want to talk about other sports here and there, but we love football just from the ground up. We can dissect every bit, every part of football. We know we know all kinds of terminology, and that's just on the surface. I mean, obviously, that's not what makes it, a good analyst, but we have all kinds of just knowledge about the sport, and we do have knowledge in other sports, but football is the one that we love, the one that we've always been watching, since just birth. I mean, we love football, and we're going to talk about football. That's what our community is going to be about. But yes, we will dip and dive into other sports, when it, gravitates around, national news and things like that. We will dip into that. But yeah, football forecast, pretty much football, just football. And yeah, we're going to see how that goes. And, we're going to be a long thing coming down the line. We're going to be, here for a long, long time. And, I'm really excited for this journey to see, where we go after this and, try to expand, try to get more people to come in here and watch this. And yeah, just, like I was saying earlier, I want to bring a community in that likes talking about football, especially revolving around the SEC, because we are primarily SEC fans. We probably will talk a little bit more about the SEC than other divisions, conferences, and things like that. But that's just because, that's where we get our most news from. That's where, what our family talks about, what people we know talk about. And also, it's a niche. It's a niche of very good people, very, strong, opinionated, people, fans in the SEC that we're here to, communicate with, talk with, that can come watch and, and give us suggestions of what to talk about and come, just talk to us, just hang out with us and interact. And that brings me to my last point of this little introduction here, that our main goal here from Football Forecast is to interact with you guys. We don't want to create a show where you can just listen to us talk about football and that's it. Our goal is to have a community, like I said. So we want you guys to come on here, suggest things for us to talk about, talk with us, give us topics. We'll talk, back and forth with you in the chat. We'll see what you're talking about. We have our own topics ourselves, of course, and that's stuff that we're going to, talk about all year and things like that. But we really strive on just interacting with the fans and just having a good community built and just having good, strong communication with the people in our community. And that, that's a fun part about it. That's why we like doing this. We like to talk about football with you guys and just have our own little community. That's the goal. All right. So now that we got the introduction out of the way, we can go ahead and get into the real meat and potatoes of this whole football forecast, our podcast, which is talking about football. So today, it is July 23rd, right before the football season. People would say this is the boring stint of football news, but, I would have to disagree, since what we've seen in the last week hasn't really been too boring. We've seen a lot of different stories in the media and things like that, revolving around football. and especially college football when I refer to the media days, in particular the SEC media days. Now, if you're not familiar, if you're not the biggest football fan, usually around this time of the year, every single year, there's media days that go around every single division. Usually they take part in one conference, and teams from that conference will come and have players that will talk about their program, and have coaches come and talk about their program and what they're doing, what they're being up to, how they're gonna build their program this year, and things like that. And we paid very, very heavy and close attention to the SEC media days this past week, and we did see a little bit of drama being stirred up this year at the SEC media days. In particular, I'm talking about Alabama and Clemson kind of taking shots back and forth at each other here. So Alabama did stir up the pot this media day this past week with some comments that some have judged were from a sore loser's perspective. Dylan Moses remarked that Georgia was the toughest team he had played this year and not Clemson. So that comment sparked a multitude of journalistic reactions across football news, and it elicited a reaction from Clemson lineman Josh Simpson, who said, "We got our opinions, they got theirs. I personally feel like Notre Dame was the best team that we played." So that's what Clemson fired back at Dylan Moses. And Paul Feinbaum said, the star journalist of the SEC, he said he ridiculed these comments and remarked that his words were ridiculous. This sparked Clemson Golden Boy Trevor Lawrence to publicly call Paul Feinbaum unprofessional. All right, so let's break that down. That's a lot. So first thing, obviously I think everybody knew that when Alabama was going in the media day, nobody had heard from Nick Saban, nobody had heard from any of these players about that loss, and like a press conference about that loss until now. And so I think that was the big thing going into this media day, was the loss and talking about the blowout that happened in the national championship. So I would say that before these players even went in, they were probably just shaking their heads at the thought of this. They didn't want to be asked, these questions about the loss, but they knew it was going to happen.
Right. I mean, this is something that's been kind of bantered and talked about ever since the championship came back in January. So this has kind of been a back and forth thing, and I guess with the media days ongoing this past week with both the SEC and ACC, I guess a lot of reporters and people still have this on their minds. People are saying that Clemson continues to talk about the game because they feel like they're not being respected. Alabama is coming back and offering opinions about why they didn't play well in that game, and people claim that Alabama's making excuses. At this point, I mean, the media days is all about, talking about and getting ready for the upcoming season, and not talking about what happened 6 months ago. We all saw the game. We saw what happened. Everybody who saw the game would agree and realize that Clemson was the better team. There's no question about that. So people can sit there and say Alabama's making excuses. That's one way to look at it. Really, what they're doing is they're offering opinions about why they didn't play well. But if you really look into it closer, this is Nick Saban setting Alabama up to get ready for the upcoming season. This is some information and thoughts that he's putting into his players' heads, so they will prepare with the notion that the championship game, as far as Alabama's perspective, was an epic failure.
Oh yeah,
they did not show up. They didn't appear to be very well prepared. So this is going to be a motivator for them going to the upcoming season to learn from what happened in that game, so they can be better prepared to get through the season and be able to play better if they should get to the championship game again. So people can look at it and say they're making excuses, but I think what's happening is Saban is trying to get them mentally prepared for the upcoming season. He's famous for always saying to never waste a failure, so he's trying to let this serve as a lesson to his team and try to spin this into a positive manner where it's going to benefit them coming up this year.
I mean, definitely. If there's anything that we know about Nick Saban in Alabama, it's the fact that, he's eating this up. Every time you see any kind of media reaction or anything that that has elicited a media reaction, he's eating that up and he's turning it into fuel for his players and things like that. But to address the comments that that went on, the remarks that went on back and forth, the banter. I mean, it's hard to say, just who's in the right, who's in the wrong when it comes to this, situation. But really what it comes down to is you have, like I was saying earlier, these players, it's the first time they've had to publicly speak about this loss since the post-game press conference. And obviously they're not going to come out there and say, oh yeah, we lost, Clemson was the better team, they beat us, there was nothing we could do from the 1st and 10 with 15 minutes on the clock, there was nothing we could do. I mean, obviously they're not going to say that. These players are looking for any kind of anything that Saban has said, oh, this is why we have lost, or this is what you have done. They're looking for any kind of mechanism for themselves to say, hey, this is what happened. I don't know what you want me to say. I think that's why Dylan Moses said what he said. He could have been a lot more, he could have been a lot more aggressive and disrespectful with his comment. I just think it depends on how you take it. Honestly, when you look at it from that light and seeing that it was that disrespectful, it seems that you're kind of pulling a Clemson bias, and you would say that about anything that Alabama's players have said. If you said, if an Alabama player said, oh, I think they beat us because they outmatched us on, in the coaching aspect, or they called, better defensive coverages and moved their guys around more, it would just sound like, oh, Alabama's making excuses. And I mean, I think at any level, whatever you say, somebody could say that Alabama's making excuses. So I don't necessarily think Alabama's making excuses. Even if one player did, doesn't mean the whole school and the whole program is thinking that way. I do think Dylan Moses meant with his comments that Georgia was a more physical team, and I see exactly what he means by that. Georgia is a more physical team. You can look at that however you want. Georgia all season has been the most physical in the country, only rivaled Alabama. They're just a more physical team. They will break you down. Clemson did not break teams down. They outscored teams. They had Trevor Lawrence there. They had these wide receivers with this route running that was phenomenal. They had this D line that could get to the quarterback, but they didn't have any. When you watch a SEC game, it's more about the linebackers and the running backs and things like that. It's more about the upfront tackling, the physical toughness of it. That's why we say the SEC is the toughest conference. Right. That's all he meant. He literally used the word physical to describe that. Clemson just wasn't as physical as Georgia. That's not saying that Georgia's way better than Clemson, but Georgia was the more physical team. They're way more physical than Clemson.
Yeah, and if you look at Georgia, I mean, Georgia is basically the way that team is built and the way they play. They're just basically built in Alabama's image. Kirby Smart was Alabama's defensive coordinator for 7 years. He worked under Nick Saban for over a decade, so he a lot of what he does is model after ways Saban runs Alabama's program, and that's the way they play. Georgia is going to be very strong like Alabama is, up and down both the offense defensive lines, and they believe in being physical, playing power football. Defense means a lot of man-man coverage. So wherever you get against every one of these teams, offense, defensively, you're going to have to earn it. And Clemson, even though Clemson is in the ACC, they are basically, as far as a football standpoint, they're like an SEC football program. You look at their fan base, you look at the way they play, you look at the kind of players they recruit. They play and look very much like an SEC football team. I think one thing that kind of distinguishes Clemson from, say, a team like Georgia is Clemson is physical. But I think with Clemson, though, you have a lot of great skill players on the outside, on the edges, and you have a lot of really good speed. And I think that Clemson is probably a little bit better in that aspect than probably both Georgia and, say, Alabama or any other teams are. But I think overall, I don't think they're probably quite as physical. But overall, they may have a little bit better team speed, which helps them. Also, too, going back to the Alabama-Clemson debate, you hear all these Clemson players talking about what Alabama players said and what other people have said and media has said about them and how they don't think they're getting their due respect. It makes you kind of wonder, talking all that, if where the Clemson players' heads are. Are they really mentally ready for the upcoming season? Are they getting ready for that? Or are they still worried about what happened 6 months ago?
I mean, if you beat Alabama the way they did, you shouldn't be worried about respect. The only image, if Nick Saban beat Alabama, the way that Clemson did, the only thing going through his head would be, wow, we beat them that physically. We beat them by those margins. That was a great win. He looks at the good things they did and the bad things they did, and it looks like Clemson's not really addressing, anything that they need to improve on or I guess it seems like what you said, the SEC Media Day for them was mostly focused on answering those questions in more of a celebratory type of, we're owed something and let's make this last as long as possible. Whereas in an Alabama standpoint, if you look after Alabama beat Georgia, they were getting ready for the next season. No questions about that last championship, nothing like that. So that may have been attributed to how tight that game was, and obviously you should be a little worked up if that game was that tight. We almost lost it. I mean, but if at the same time, a championship is a championship, and I agree. I mean, I think Clemson's head should be in the place of, we're going to have to play Alabama again next year. If things are, looking the way they are now, we're going to have to play Bama again. How are we going to beat them this time now that Saban has seen us beat them?
And I think that's why a lot of the media's questions at both those media days was slanted towards those two teams and those type of questions, because if you look at it, Clemson is the overwhelming favorite in the ACC. There's nobody that's even really close to them. And aside from maybe one or two of the ACC teams on their schedule, they're not going to be seriously challenged by anybody. They should win that conference. They should go through undefeated. There's really not anybody there who should be a big challenge for them. You look at Alabama. Alabama is not going to be as big a favorite because in the SEC you got stiffer competition. But I think most everybody is going to be picking them to win that conference, and it probably more than likely, when you get to the national championship game, or at least in the playoffs, is probably going to come down to Alabama and Clemson again.
Yeah.
I mean, if you look,
I don't see who else.
If you look at the top 20, top 25 teams in the country, and you kind of see where teams are going to be slotted at and who's going to fall where, I think everybody would agree Alabama and Clemson in some order are going to be the top two teams, and then you probably draw a line and you have a little bit of a dip after that. Maybe you look at Georgia number 3, Ohio State 4, Oklahoma 5 in some type of order. Mm-hmm. Then you have another line drawn and probably have another little dip, and then you have the next kind of tier of teams which are out there. But again, with Clemson, you kind of have to wonder though: are they going to be mentally prepared for the season when it starts? Based on their comments, it seems like they're still looking behind them as far as what happened last year instead of looking ahead. And Clemson is a fairly easy schedule. They don't have a lot of tough games, but they do have two of their tougher games are going to be early on. They got to play Texas A&M at home the second game of the season. Texas A&M is going to be an improved team. They'll probably be somewhere, I'm guessing, between number 10 and 20. Mm-hmm. Somewhere in the teens probably is where they're going to start the season at ranked. So that should be a good challenge for Clemson early. And then the next week, they got to play at Syracuse. A game that they lost there 2 years ago. And the team that came closest to beating Clemson last year. Clemson had come from behind in the fourth quarter at home to beat Syracuse last year. So, if Clemson is not ready to play those two games, they could possibly lose one of those. I mean, if they're going to lose a game, that's probably where it would happen, somewhere or one of those 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, the chances can't be that high that they're going to go undefeated again. I mean, regardless of, it being college football and, it being Clemson, it's still football. So the chances of them, going undefeated again, making it to that spot and beating Alabama, again, undefeated, it's very low. You have to look. Clemson's one of those teams that could defy all those odds, but we will have to see. But yeah, I mean, like you said, I think it's unanimous that everybody agrees that we're gonna see Clemson and Alabama there again. I really can't see how you can refute that unless something happens. Texas A&M comes out from behind, out of the bushes, and destroys Clemson somehow, or Georgia, is able to beat Alabama in the SEC championship. If, both of those things happen, or one of those things happen, then that could defy the odds. But both of those things would have to happen to not see Alabama or Clemson there again. So yeah, that's very unlikely. Like I said, we'll see them there again for that matchup. And these comments will probably be looked at next year if that game does happen and Alabama is able to take that W against Clemson, if that is to actually happen. All right, so moving on past that, yeah, it is a very controversial topic within our world, our SEC world, definitely. Yeah, it's something to definitely talk about. All right, so moving on, usually we would kind of stick around college football before we launch into NFL, but honestly, if we go back and forth, it doesn't really bother me. I don't think anybody else really cares if we just jump around, but so let's go into NFL news, something I wrote, the other day, actually this morning. I wrote down looking at the Falcons signing defensive end Alan Bailey, who started 13 games for the Kansas City Chiefs in 2018, and also hit his career high of 6 sacks. So things could be looking up here for the Atlanta defense, which recently has been annually criticized for not having one of the most dominant defenses in the league. With defensive tackle Grady Jarrett reaching 6 sacks last year and the addition of new depth in the line such as John Kaminsky, and not to mention the secondary firepower that is now back from an ankle injury with Keanu Neal, or I should say ACL, I'm unfamiliar with that, it's safe to say that the Falcons are now back in the running to go toe-to-toe with the New Orleans Saints for the NFC South this year. That's something I wrote down earlier, and I wholeheartedly believe that. I believe that with, the Falcons are making these defensive moves, and, being a fan of the NFC South, I feel that, the Falcons are now ready to go toe-to-toe with the New Orleans Saints and maybe have an edge over them at this point. A lot of people were doubting their defense, and, people that don't know the Falcons as well, criticize the Falcons defense. But there is good reason for that. With Keanu Neal, not healthy, Deion Jones not being able to play half the season, there is reason to say Falcons have a mediocre defense. But now with Deion back at full health, Keanu Neal at full health, you have new depth at corner. You have a new depth at the D line with John Kaminsky and the addition of Alan Bailey, and Grady Jarrett, who just got paid. Both of those guys, Alan and Grady, have 6 sacks last year. You really have to look at the Atlanta Falcons and say, wow, I mean, maybe this is a team that can beat the Saints this year, that can win the division against the New Orleans Saints. I mean, beforehand it was looking like, yeah, they could go toe-to-toe, but the New Orleans Saints had the edge. But now it's looking like a real 50-50 shot. I don't really know about you, but that's what I'm saying. I say that the Falcons and the Saints have a 50-50 shot this year for the NFC South.
I don't know. I think both have a fair chance of winning that division. I think that if you look at, I think Drew Brees, at least offensively, I think Drew Brees is a little bit better quarterback than Matt Ryan.
Yeah, you'd be correct.
But Matt Ryan may have a little bit better supporting cast around him as far as his running backs and receivers than Drew Brees does. Yeah, Drew Brees has Alvin Kamara,
Michael Thomas,
who's awfully good. Michael Thomas is awfully good.
I feel like they're outmatched there, though.
But they don't have Mark Ingram anymore.
Exactly.
That's going to help. That's going to hurt them. And I think tight end is going to be a little bit of an issue for them as well. So as good as Drew Brees is, you wonder if that offense is going to be quite as good.
That's why I say that the Falcons might have the edge, because it seems like those roles that the Saints usually fill are not filled by them right now, and the Falcons are filling those roles. I mean, You look and the Saints really have one wide receiver now that it's their, number one receiver, their main target, which is Michael Thomas.
Right.
The Falcons now have two, if not three.
Yeah, I mean, you got Julio Jones. I mean, you got Calvin Ridley.
Mohamed Sanu.
Yeah, Sanu.
You got Justin Hardy for depth.
Right.
You have Calvin Ridley, who is one of the best rookies last year, in general. He almost won Rookie of the Year. I mean, he was there. His stats for a rookie, especially on a team with the best wide receiver in the league and Julio Jones, were phenomenal. So when you have these, and I didn't even mention Austin Hooper because you said the Saints don't have a tight end, but Austin Hooper's looking at like one of the best tight ends in the league right now in the top 5.
Austin Hooper is pretty good tight end. He's not a guy who gets a lot of attention or talked about, but
Definitely.
he's proven himself to be a pretty solid tight end.
Especially in the past 2 years, I think Austin Hooper has been one of the most underrated tight ends, and I would definitely put him at least in the top 8 to 10 tight ends. But yes, definitely. They fill another one of those roles that the Saints can't fill. Yeah, I mean, it seems like, Matt Ryan is kind of matching Drew Brees' firepower with just how many weapons he has. And I don't really need to mention the backs because, obviously the Saints have their Devontae Freeman and Alvin Kamara. So that is one thing that they are kind of matched with. The Falcons have Ito Smith to back up Devontae Freeman in those third down runs, but they're kind of, the same backs. The Saints don't really have any firepower there after Mark Ingram left or got traded, whatever that situation was. Now, the Saints kind of do have to worry about, their offensive firepower a little bit, especially if that Michael Thomas, contract drama goes on. I don't know the status of that right now. I know a while back there was some, drama with that, but I'm not sure if that's still going on. But if that persists, then, that could be a thing the Saints have to worry about. And, yeah, I would give the edge to the Atlanta Falcons. But, like I said, right now it looks 50-50. I'm very excited to see what the NFC South does. Very excited to see if one of these, sleeper teams in the Bucs or the Panthers can come out and surprise people, especially the Bucs. I'm really looking at the Bucs this year. But, yeah, I think the Falcons look like they might have the edge in a second here, depending on how the rest of the camp goes.
We'll see. I think the key of them is they're going to be a defense. If their defense, it doesn't have to be great. If their offense is as good as it should be, if their defense is just average or just a little bit above average, that's probably going to be good enough, and that might be the difference. The Saints have an okay defense too, but it's not a great defense. But the Falcons have enough good players. If they can stay healthy, they should have a pretty decent defense. And if that's the case, those two teams I think, will be fairly evenly matched. So it could be very close to see whoever wins that division.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. I think if I had to give, something besides, the lack of defensive firepower to the Falcons, if I just pull up their schedule now, from looking at what their schedule looked like earlier, the one thing that I see, or just another thing that I see that could really hurt the Falcons, is they have to play the Saints and all of their division rivals almost back-to-back. They have to play literally all of them at the same exact time. I believe it goes like this. So it's the Falcons, Saints, Falcons, Panthers, Falcons, Bucks, Saints, Falcons, Falcons, Panthers, Falcons, Bucks. So yeah, they have to play all of their division rivals in one little chunk of their schedule. So that's going to be pretty scary for the Falcons, having to, battle for their division back and forth like that. So that's one thing that could affect them, playing the Saints almost back to back like that. But we will see. I mean, it really is an 18-day period where they don't play the Saints. So, yeah, I mean, we're going to have to see about that if that's going to be really the deciding factor over who.
And one thing, too, I don't think the Saints' schedule is going to be quite as difficult as the Falcons.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the Saints' schedules, I mean, you don't have a lot of the top teams in the league on there. I mean, you got, of course, all their division rivals on there. But you look at their schedule here. They got the Texans at home. They're at the Rams. They're at the Seahawks. The Rams game that should be kind of a tough game. That Texans game should be very winnable for them. The Seahawks, I'm not sure what to make of them. I don't think they're going to be that good this year. I certainly don't think they're going to be a playoff team. That's a game they should win. And a lot of the better teams on their schedule, they get home. They get the Cowboys at home. Like I said, the Texans are at home. They do play at the Jaguars.
Mm-hmm.
That should be a winnable game for them. They do have to play at the Bears. That might be the toughest game on their schedule.
For the Saints, I would say the Bears definitely. Yes.
Yeah, and then, did they get the Cardinals at home? That's going to be probably the worst teams, one of the worst teams in the league. You got at the Titans. That's a winnable game for them. They get the Colts at home. That's a very winnable game. They got the 49ers at home. The 49ers, I'm not sure about them. They may be a 500 team at best, but at home, I think that's definitely a game the Saints should win. So overall, I mean, it's not a super tough schedule.
Yeah, looking at the Falcons' schedule as well, at the first game of the season, they play the Vikings, which should be, winnable for Atlanta. And then, they host the Eagles in Atlanta, which should be a tough one. The Eagles could definitely take that dub if they're playing at 100% health, 100% firepower, and they've done it before, so, that could be a game that the Falcons might lose second game of the season. Playing the Colts should be winnable, but Andrew Luck's looking pretty good this year, so that's, questionable. Titans winnable, Texans is winnable, Cardinals probably, yeah. Rams kind of hard, that's 3 games I've listed there that could be, pretty difficult. Seahawks should be winnable, and then you have Saints, obviously, and Panthers, Bucks, all that, those should be winnable. The 49ers definitely. So yeah, 3 games, maybe 4, and then on the Saints, really we have 1 or 2. So yeah, I definitely have to give the Saints that little bit of an edge in the schedule there, but we will see. That's a very interesting storyline. I don't think many people are looking at. Maybe it's just because I'm a fan of the NFC South, a Falcons fan at heart. But I mean, that's a pretty interesting storyline to see. I would like to see more people talking about that. The Falcons and Saints. One of the best rivalries in the NFL. Who's gonna get that? Who's gonna win that NFC South? That looks like a good storyline.
Yeah.
Hope people start talking about that more. It's gonna be nice to follow during the season. We'll definitely track that for you guys and. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, and as we get closer to the beginning of football season, each broadcast we have, we'll kind of focus on some of the different divisions in NFL and kind of dissect it a little bit and figure out, who's going to be the real contenders for each division and who may be, serious playoff contenders as well. So we'll kind of go through that a little bit each week as we get closer to the beginning of the season. So,
yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see a lot of different, teams this year, and like you said, we're very excited to cover a lot of different divisions for you guys and break down a lot of different stories, scenarios, and division wins for you guys. And like I said, we want to build a community that includes NFL fans. So. Anybody that has a favorite NFL team, go ahead and drop it in the comments for us. We'll cover those for you guys. Obviously, we're going to cover all 32 NFL teams. But, if you guys have any topics for us, anything to suggest, anything football, we'll gladly answer that. And I'll be very happy to talk about that for you guys. And, it's going to be nice. It's going to be nice talking about all these cool storylines going on this year. Kyler Murray, got Josh Jacobs, the new rookies, Tom Brady's cliff, thing. Max Kellerman's cliff theory for Tom Brady. That's the thing you talk about.
Yeah.
All kinds of storylines this year, so it's going to be fun. All right, so what other topics do we have to go ahead and discuss today?
There are several. Staying with the NFL, I mean, there's, this is the kind of year, you kind of starting to talk about the teams a little bit. Mm-hmm. Teams are getting ready for training camps to begin. You see some roster movement. You see some players, particularly some veteran players, getting cut right about now. Some players are getting picked up by teams and getting signed. So you're seeing a little bit of movement, and everybody's kind of getting ready for the training camps to kick off. Just looking at some different teams, some different scenarios. This time of year, where a lot of people want to start talking about who to look at as far as who they think the best teams might be, the teams that might make the playoffs, might be Super Bowl contenders or whatever. But instead of this, what about who is going to be the worst NFL team this year?
The worst NFL team this year.
Yeah,
well,
I mean,
I mean, yeah. So that's definitely something that I want to talk about, and then I always, talk about just naturally with people that talk about football. And that's just because usually it's unanimously agreed, right? Like everybody always has a team that they say is going to be the worst. Last year we said the Giants, and it was the Giants pretty much, or before that, before they got Saquon, it was the Giants. We said the Cardinals last year because they had nobody. They were getting rid of all their players, all their management, and it was the Cardinals. So usually it's all unanimous, but this year is kind of different because the Cardinals, who were the worst team in the league, now have a Heisman Trophy winner in Kyler Murray. Is he going to pan out? Is he not? That's another question to ask. So I think that this year we're not just looking at who is the most untalented and who is the one that was bad last year that's going to be worse this year. It's not really a question of that. It's when you look at these teams, it's everything. We have to decide a team that is going to look bad, that just doesn't have talent, that doesn't have the right management and things like that. And I will say right now, I will eliminate one team because I can't tell you right now who it is, but I can eliminate one, and it is the Dolphins. The Dolphins will not be the worst team in the league next year, and people will say that. I mean, if you ask a million football fans, I'll say 9 out of 10 would probably say the Dolphins are going to be the worst team. And that's something I don't understand, why. They have 2 quarterbacks now that are in very good positions. If you have a quarterback problem, this is a very good quarterback problem to have. You have Ryan Fitzpatrick and Josh Rosen. That is a very good situation to have. Mm-hmm. You have a rookie who's not terrible. He's an average quarterback. And you have Ryan Fitzpatrick, who's one of the best backup quarterbacks in history. I mean, he's awesome. He's great. He literally came out for the Buccaneers last year and he won 4 straight games, and everybody thought he was the next Messiah, the prophet. And he's good. He's called Fitzmagic for a reason. He can ball out when he needs to.
Yeah.
So that's a great situation to have. So I don't see that as a problem for them. Running back situation, Kenyon Drake, probably the most underrated running back in the league. This guy is Alvin Kamara. He's on the same level of Alvin Kamara to me, and nobody can tell me different. A lot of people would argue that Alvin Kamara is probably the best back or one of, in the top 3 best backs in the league. Kenyon Drake is right up there with Alvin Kamara, just talent-wise. Can do the same exact things. Right. Everything that he can do, Kenyon Drake can do the same or better. He's just underrated because he's not on the great team.
Well, not only that, for whatever reason, Kenyon Drake has never seemed to have gotten a fair shot in Miami at getting a starting job. It seems for whatever reason, he'll come out one week and he'll get a lot of touches. He'll play a great game. He'll make some plays, and then the next week he hardly touches the ball at all. So I don't know what the deal with that is. I'm not.
And it could just be, the scheming of things, which is one thing to look at. I mean, we're talking about players, but it could just be the scheme. These guys may want to run, a zone offense where they want to, have a power back there, have a strong back where they can run up the middle, open up some zones for the linebackers and, throw it over the top. But really when I'm looking at it, I feel like now the Dolphins have kind of found their identity, and I think you could agree at the end of the year, it looked like they did find their identity. I mean, we were watching these Dolphins games, and they were throwing all kinds of screens, and, they were looking like kind of like the Saints, but with their own little flair to it. They had, a little bit of this outside game, like Ricky Williams type running with his, bouncing it outside and just, throwing it in the flats and beating people downfield and, relying on the secondary and the defense. So I think it's going to be a lot more of that. I think it's going to be a lot more of the Kenyon Drake show and a lot more of the, check it down to me. I'm going to take care of it because they don't have the most skilled wide receivers. It's going to be a lot more of a cat and mouse game with the defense and the wide receivers. And I think it's going to be a lot more based on routes, a lot more based on quarterback play is what they're going to have to rely on. With this quarterback situation, neither of these guys are phenomenal. They're good quarterbacks, but neither of them are phenomenal.
No, but they're serviceable.
Exactly. So that's why I think the Dolphins playbook is not going to look like the Saints playbook this year. It's not going to look like the Falcons. It's going to look like the Patriots. I think they're going to use a little bit of these screens, probably some slants and things like that, some in routes and manageable average routes that you just see from an average even a college football team. Yeah. That's what they're going to rely on, and I feel like even with the strong type of I-form formation, these bouncing outside routes and stretches and screens, that's the type of stuff they're going to rely on, is just stuff in the flats and stuff outside. So I don't see how they can be the worst team in the league because now they found their identity. They have a good running back. They don't have the most talented wide receivers, but they do have a decent quarterback, position going on here, a situation. And with the defense, they got Minka Fitzpatrick in the secondary. They already have a beast secondary. I mean, they were balling out in the secondary last year when it came to those those big jump balls and things like that. And big games when it was a passing attack. And I think that this year they cannot be the worst team in the league. So getting that out of the way, you really have to look at the Cardinals. It seems like it has to be the Cardinals, right? I mean, the only way it can't is if Kyler Murray pans out the way that we think he's going to go.
Yeah.
And that's a stretch. So,
the Cardinals are certainly – nobody is going to be picking them to do any great things this year. And I think a lot of their success is going to be pinned on what Kyler Murray is going to be able to do. Unless he comes in and just totally stinks it up in the preseason, Kyler is probably going to be their starting quarterback. I think he's got a coach who understands what his strengths as far as his skills as a player are, and he's going to be designing an offense. I think it's probably going to give Kyler the best chance to succeed. Kyler does have some weapons around him. He's not going to have a running back per se. Not anybody that's any good, but he does have some good skill receivers. He still has Larry Fitzpatrick there, who is not the Larry Fitzpatrick that we saw play 4 or 5 years ago, but he's still a pretty good receiver. And I think that the Cardinals have a decent line, and they've got some players on defense, particularly their secondary and linebackers. Their back seven is pretty. It's not bad. Their defensive line is not going to be one of the best around.
It's definitely not memorable.
No, but their back seven. You got guys like Patrick Peterson and some other guys back there. I mean, their back seven defense is pretty solid. So I think if they can get some offense going, I think they've got a chance to win some games. I mean, if I have to look at all the teams and try to decide who I think might be the worst team this year, I would have to look at the Giants.
Yeah.
I mean, the Giants were one of the worst teams in the league last year.
But that was with Odell. With
Odell. That was with Landon Collins. That was with all these guys that they decided to get rid of and clean house. I mean, so what do they have now? They have a bunch of no-name players. They're going to probably. They're going to probably. They got Saquon Barkley. They got Eli Manning, who may be the worst starting quarterback in the NFL.
Probably.
I mean, my guess is at some point this season he's not going to be the starting quarterback anymore, because they got a first-round draft pick sitting on the sidelines, and if things don't go well, after the first several games, and they can kind of see how that season's going to go, this may be Eli's last year. So at that point, what have they got to lose? Why not, take a kid who they've invested a first-round pick in, a lot of money, and put him out there and let him see what he can do. But I don't see how the Giants are going to win very many games. They're in one of the tougher divisions in NFL. You got the Cowboys, who are probably a playoff type team. The Redskins may be a playoff type team. The Eagles should be pretty good. And then you got the Giants sitting there. They got to play each one of those teams twice, and they've got some other tough games on their schedule. And looking at their schedule, I don't see them winning, but maybe 3 or 4 games at the most. It may not even be that many. Because if you look at it, you got maybe the worst starting NFL quarterback. You got Saquon Barkley, and then what do you have after that?
Looking at it that way, I kind of do agree. I'd probably, retract my statement if I could and go back and say that, the Giants are looking at that spot. I completely forgot about Landon Collins, who's arguably one of the best safeties in the league. Now not there, and, being in Washington now. I really only thought that they were kept from being the worst team last year because of Saquon. But now I look back at it, they had Landon Collins, they had Odell, and they were still one of the worst teams in the league. So without those two players, just those two, I don't even have to mention the rest, but without those two, and also the way the ownership is going and the way the fan base is resenting the ownership and the way that just the culture is looking there in New York, I have a hard time seeing them, not being the worst team. It would have to be a battle between them and the Cardinals. But I think that after hearing that, the Giants do seem, like they could definitely be the worst team. So yeah, with the starting quarterback situation, we're gonna have to see how that goes with Daniel Jones. But yeah, geez, I mean they're in a bad position, definitely. I think when you look at that, and you look at the Dolphins. A lot of people still saying the Dolphins are going to be the worst in the league. I mean, how can you say the Dolphins are going to be worse than the Giants with that? I mean, that just makes no sense to me.
At least the Dolphins, they've got some guys with some skill. They've got some stud players. I mean, they don't have enough of them.
I mean, they've got
some playmakers on the team. They got some guys that can help them win some games.
They've got their Landon Collins with Minka Fitzpatrick. They've got their Landon. They don't have an Odell, but they do have, kind of a Saquon. Obviously, Kenyon Drake's not as good of a, power halfback, whatever, all around as Saquon is, but he's definitely Alvin Kamara. I mean, he's definitely an all-around one-man show guy. He can do it all, catch, whatever. Even last year, I can't remember if it was a 90-yard touchdown running or receiving that Kenyon Drake got, but it was one of those. He got a long touchdown pass or he got a long touchdown run. It was one of those. But, since I can't tell the difference between those, that just tells me I can't remember which one he did because I know he caught a lot of balls last year. He ran a lot of, long runs. Even that tells me, like, I don't see they shouldn't have a problem with their offensive, scheme, weaponry, whatever, unless it comes down to a time where they want to throw, some deep balls and focus on the wide receiver share. That's not going to happen. But regardless, they're looking good in that aspect over the Giants. So, yeah, I have to place the Giants there probably after hearing that. Definitely. So, yeah, worst team in the NFL next year, probably the Giants. I mean, yeah. As much as I want to say the Patriots, I can't really say that. They just won the Super Bowl. But, yeah. What else is on the agenda for today? Football forecast.
I don't know. There are several things. I guess we could. I saw one interesting story here today that I thought was worth mentioning. How the Forbes magazine comes out. They have all these different lists. Mm-hmm. Of course, Forbes is a money magazine, an investment magazine. They often put out lists evaluating the valuations of certain companies as far as what they think they're worth. Who is more financially viable than the next competitor, and things like that. Well, they have put out a list of the most valuable sports franchises professionally, and I found it interesting that at the very top of the list, I mean, you have all kinds of different franchises out there in different sports who seem to always do well. They have great fan bases. They sell lots of tickets. And when you think about valuable sports franchises, you think about teams like the Yankees. You think about the Lakers. And other teams like that. I found it interesting, especially considering the success or lack thereof on the field in recent seasons. Forbes has named the Dallas Cowboys as the most valuable sports franchise.
I will tell you exactly why that is a thing. I'll tell you exactly why that has happened. When I talk to anybody about football, and I'm on a lot of different social medias and forums regarding football, talking about NFL, Madden, whatever it is, just international people that love football. When I talk to foreign people about football, people that are from South America, Spain, anywhere in Europe, Australia, wherever it may be, there are loads of those foreign people that look for a team and say, oh, okay, I'm going to be a Cowboys fan. And when I say that, I mean, I guarantee you, if you took every single foreign NFL fan that's never stepped foot into the United States, I guarantee you 80% of them would be Cowboys fans. and that's just because they're America's team, or whatever. In recent years, I think that's because just when you look at the NFL, you see the Cowboys or the Patriots, just because of their history. I can't really tell you why that is. For the Cowboys, because in my I'm only I'm pretty much 17, so in my years of living, I've never seen the Cowboys be truly successful. But I know I know enough football to know that before me, the Cowboys were almost always successful. So that makes sense that people foreign to the U.S. love the Cowboys, and which brings me to this, that they buy the merch, they buy the jerseys, they buy the cups, the towels, the whatever. They buy all that. They buy tickets when they go to the U.S. They buy tickets to those games. They buy gifts for their friends. They talk about them. They draw more attention to the stadium. It's also Texas, one of the biggest states. I just think they just have more hype around them than any other team, just because they are the face of the NFL. As crappy as they have been as a team, regardless of now they have Amari Cooper, and I'm actually looking forward to seeing what the Cowboys do. Regardless of that, they still remain. They still have that face of the NFL intact. So that's probably why they're number one. It probably goes a lot more in depth than that, but I have to say merch and jersey sales.
It does. Merchandising is a large part of that, and of course, past history and success is part of that as well. The Cowboys are just a highly visible team. They're a team that the media always talks about, regardless of how well they're not doing. And when you go internationally, when you go to other countries where football is followed, you have a lot of Cowboys fans internationally as well. It's the same thing with the Yankees.
With any league. The Lakers.
The Lakers are again a team.
Yankees,
like that. Even though the Lakers haven't done well for several seasons now, really since Kobe Bryant left there, they are still maybe the most popular NBA franchise out there. Even though the Warriors have done extremely well the last several years, the Cavaliers before that with LeBron James. But even when the Lakers are really bad, like they have been here a couple of seasons lately, they're still one of the most talked about teams in the league.
Exactly. It would be the same thing like with the Patriots and the Cowboys, right? Like you see the Patriots would be your Golden State in this situation. Like you go to, Europe, let's see how many, European NBA fans are wearing Golden State versus how many are wearing Lakers. It's obviously going to be way more wearing Lakers. Same thing with the Patriots and Cowboys. Yeah. Patriots and Golden State have won, the last 10 years they've been the most dominant teams in sports history. It's ridiculous how much they've won. But if you like I said, you go to Europe, let's see how many of those are wearing Lakers and Cowboys gear rather than Patriots and Golden State gear. So yeah, I think, like I said, it goes a lot more in depth than that. But I think with that merchandising, I think that brings hype. I think that brings talk. And yeah, they just have that. They're always going to have that face of the NFL, regardless of how bad they do. They could go 0-16. They still have that face of the NFL intact. So yeah, that's probably definitely why they're number one.
Guess who's number 10 on that list? Now, of course, I don't have the list in front of me at the moment. I forget exactly the exact order. I think the Yankees were number 2 on that list. On further down, you have some international soccer teams. Of course, you got teams like Manchester United, Real Madrid, big-time soccer teams who are I think their valuations were somewhere around the $4 million range. The Cowboys are valued, by the way, at $5 million. It's going to be $5 billion, I should say.
Wow.
I think the Yankees were $4.6 billion. They were second. Guess who was number 10 on that list?
New England Patriots.
No.
Who was number 10?
The number 10 team on that list, which I believe was valued at $3.3 billion, was the New York Giants.
The Giants?
The Giants. One of the worst, maybe the worst team in the NFL, is number 10.
Yeah, that's just something, I guess the same thing. You just have to chop that up to just being, the face of the NFL, or one of the faces. They've never been, phenomenal, but I think even if you go back to, especially the 80s, or the 90s, Lawrence Taylor, right? Probably the best defensive player ever. Honestly, people would say he's the best defensive athlete of all time. in that era with the Super Bowl wins, especially with Eli Manning's, Super Bowl wins. I mean, the Giants have never been that Cowboys level face of the NFL, but I mean, they sure have had a taste of what the face of the NFL looks like. And, being the only team to, beat the Patriots, really, beat the Tom Brady Patriots. Yeah, like that's something that, or I guess, now with the Eagles, that's not true, but at a time they were. So I guess that makes sense. I don't really see why it's them and not the Jets, with Broadway Joe.
Yeah, the Jets were known. I'm not sure where the Jets were on the list. They were not in the top 10.
Yeah.
The Mets also were not in the top 10.
I would probably expect to see the Jets there over the Giants just because of how much history they've had, but I guess it's been a long time since that. That is kind of cryptic to me why the Giants would be number 10. I guess it's just how
actually
much
they were tied for
invested.
10th with the Lakers.
Okay.
They both had $3.3 billion. Guess which team was slotted a couple slots higher than number 10 on that list?
So what, like number 8?
Yeah, like number 8.
Was that the Patriots?
No, it was not. It's not a football team.
Not a football team. Bulls?
No, it would actually be the New York Knicks.
Okay.
Who are probably worse than the Giants and one of the worst NBA teams. They
That's
were
so
actually valued,
weird.
I think, right at about $4 billion. They were actually slotted a little bit higher than the Giants. But
Is that like regarding contracts, like all like the player salaries and stadiums and everything?
I forget all the criteria they use. The four is basically evaluate teams based on things such as ticket sales, merchandising. That's a large part of that.
So basically, just looking at the team,
Television revenues.
Just saying who's the hypest team would basically be a good measure. Who has the most hype would be a better measurement, or like the same, like an average comparison. Because if it's ticket sales and revenue, merchandising and stuff like that, it would
Part
just
of it has to do with fan bases. It has to do with merchandising. It has to do with the markets. New York is the number one, the largest media market in the world.
Yeah.
So that has a lot to do with that. Just like Los Angeles is probably number 2, so that's why you got the Lakers in there. I think the Dodgers were just behind the Lakers on that list, so they're up there. But talking about that, what I was thinking about, so if the Cowboys are the most valuable sports franchise as far as overall and as far as the NFL goes, if you were looking at who do you think would be the most valuable NFL team?
like
What team do you think, for example, let's say if you had the money to buy an NFL franchise and you could pick any NFL team that you wanted, and you take into consideration things like the current team roster,
okay,
fan base, ticket sales, media market, quality of the stadium they play in. If you take in all those different things, what team to you would be the most desirable to own? Which team do you think would be worth the most, or maybe the most valuable to own?
Okay, 2 teams come to mind. One from who I would buy personally, not out of who would be, the most successful. What would be the best decision? Not out of that. Who I would buy just from, my personal opinion would probably be the Chiefs, just because of Pat Mahomes and the way, how good he looks and how much he could change football. But if I was a businessman and it depended on, life or death regarding, my financial stance, and I had to buy a team to make money off of it, to profit, the most desirable would be the LA Rams. And that's just because, number one is because they're in LA. Any team that's in LA is automatically going to be profitable regardless. You look at the Chargers, they suck. They're like profitable. Right. They're profitable. I would, argue to see them on that list in the, next coming years. The Rams, though, just made it to the Super Bowl, regardless of how bad they got beat. They made it. They have, Todd Gurley, who's one of the best running backs in the league. Jared Goff, who is a little bit of an overrated QB, but he's definitely better than average. He's a great QB, and he's there, for them. They have a great defense now with Aaron Donald, and Aaron Donald is one of the best defensive players I've ever seen. He's on Mean Joe Green level. He is one of the best defensive players ever. You have him. You have Ndamukong Suh, who's the perfect, just above average DT to pair with him. And I'm not even sure if he's still on that roster. I can't remember if they signed him back. But
Who's that?
Ndamukong Suh. I don't even remember if he's still there.
I can't remember. I think he still is.
Okay. Well, if he is, yeah. Okay. So if he is, regardless, he's the perfect run stopper. Just I guess we're talking about last year. I mean, perfect run stopper. To pair with him, the defense is phenomenal with Aqib Talib, and those players that they now have, and I believe they have Eric Berry now, right? So that is pretty crazy. Moves that they're making, especially being in LA. So I'd have to look at the Rams and say, yeah, this is a team I would want to buy just because of their future. Now, if I looked at the Chiefs, I would want the Chiefs have the best future in the league, I would say. There's a lot of positions where they need to, improve at. I think they're looking at a Falcons situation on the defense here. Mm-hmm. They have a lot of old players that are transitioning into new players here. So I think they're looking at that situation, but that's not the reason I wouldn't buy them. The only reason I wouldn't buy them is because of location. They're in Kansas City. That's probably the least desirable location in the entire United States. That's probably number 32 on the list. So it's not their fault. Obviously, I'm sure Kansas is a beautiful place, right? I'm not even saying that. I'm just saying, L.A. is a more desirable location to the American eye or, the international eye than Kansas City is. So that's the only reason I would go. I love the Chiefs way more than I love the Rams. I would root for the Chiefs in AFC all year long. But the L.A. Rams just look good. I mean, really, regardless of how bad they got blown out. They're in L.A. They're looking good, They're like Lakers with Kobe level. They're looking really good. So that's who I would have to go. I would say that's probably the smartest decision to make. Yeah. Like I said, that pretty soundly.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. You ask that question, people are automatically look at the teams who, over the last at least several years, have been most successful. I think most people would probably automatically point to the Patriots. So that's the team I would like to own. That's the franchise I would want to be able to buy. And that's logical, I guess, to think that. But when you look at it, that team's run of success is probably getting close to running out. I think their window of winning championships is probably, if not at the end, is probably very close to being the end. Tom Brady is still one of the very best quarterbacks in the league. He is probably not quite as good as he was maybe 3 or 4 years ago, but he is still, I would say, easily in the top 2 or 3 quarterbacks. But if you look at the other players around him, the supporting cast is not quite as good as it has been in seasons past. The guys who are good there, it's an aging roster. And I think they start trying to bring some younger players, but some of those guys have never played down in the NFL, so you don't know how they're going to pan out. And also, too, if you look historically in Boston and New England area, until Brady got there with the Patriots and they started winning championships, the NFL was never a huge deal in the Boston area. I mean, yeah, the franchise always did fairly well, but when you look at their fan base, you look at the amount of attention that franchise received, it was nowhere near the level of a lot of the other teams in the league. It is now because of the success they've had and all the championships they won, and with Belichick there being the coach and everything. But historically, though, the Patriots have probably always been the third or maybe the fourth favorite professional franchise in that city. Mm-hmm. I think most people, if you look at, would generally consider the Red Sox probably being the
number one,
the team that gets the most attention, or the kind of the favorite team
in Boston.
The Celtics are probably a close second. And even the hockey team, the Bruins, hockey is, of course, very big there. They might be third and maybe ahead of the Patriots. far as that goes as well.
But now, I mean, with the winning, it's different.
So, but if I was looking at a franchise and I was an investor and looking for an opportunity, you could look at some of the top teams. You could look at franchises who are doing well. They have great fan bases. That, if you were to purchase it, that you would at least be able to sustain what they have and maybe a roster that can compete and win a Super Bowl. And I'm talking about teams like maybe the Bears, the Eagles, for example, maybe even looking at a team like the Steelers, the Chiefs, of course. Even maybe somebody like the Redskins, of course, the Saints, and things like that. But if I was looking at a team that I would look at as probably a real opportunity to get the team that has, I think, a bright future, I would pick the Browns.
The Browns?
Yeah. You've got a young quarterback who's coming to his second year, who a lot of people are high on, Baker Mayfield. They've really upgraded their roster. You've got some good stud receivers. You've got a pretty decent offensive line. They've drafted some good young defensive players who are starting to come on. You got Myles Garrett that side of the ball, who appears is going to be a very good pass rusher. And the other good players, and you look at how down that franchise has been over the last decade or so. That team is probably going to be one of the more lower value teams in the league. And that's basically because of their fortunes on the field. But, finally, that team seemed to turn a corner last year. Their season ticket sales are going through the roof, from what I understand.
That's amazing.
So you got, their fan interest is probably as high as maybe it's ever been since the team the team was reestablished in Cleveland after the initial Browns moved to Baltimore. So their marketing is going extremely well. They're selling a lot of fan merchandise. There's a lot of excitement around that franchise right now. So if I was to identify one team that if I could possibly, buy and own it, and something that's really going to take off, I would have to look at the Browns.
I like that. I mean, it's different. It's a new level of hype and culture that we've never seen in the NFL before. This is a team that's going to define the NFL, to finally be the new face. They could look like the new Cowboys. They could be the face of the NFL. So it's awesome. It's awesome to see. And definitely, I would place my money on the Browns too. That'd be a great investment. I mean, definitely things are looking up for Cleveland. Great time to be a Cleveland fan. Even better time to be a Cleveland owner, I guess. So yeah, definitely, I would agree with that as well. All right. So we're reaching the end of our usual time here. Usually, when we end it after an hour, we're judging off what we did on our last venture, our last show, our last podcast. But yeah, so usually when we end it here, a couple of things I want to say before we go ahead and end off. Like I said, this is the first episode of something that I want to be, something, long to come, something big. And we're still figuring stuff out. We're welcome to suggestions for anything. We're still, trying to figure out what kind of segments we're going to do for you guys, what kind of content we're going to post. And we already have, different ideas of what we're going to post here. Speaking of content, Madden 20 is releasing soon. And I know a lot of people that are going to watch this. Like I said, we're heavily centered around the SEC in the South. But I know a lot of people that watch this, aren't going to really care about, NFL and, aren't going to really care about Madden as much, since it's a video game. But we do have a plan for something to post related to Madden. So Madden 20 will be having a career mode, which is something Madden hasn't had in years. And the career mode is going to be centered around the position of the quarterback. And it's going to be called QB1. And basically, you make your QB, you pick a college out of 10 colleges like Florida, Texas, Oklahoma, USC, Florida State, Clemson, a bunch of colleges that we can choose from. You choose one, you win the college football playoff, go to the championship, win the championship, go to the combine, do good in the combine, then you get drafted, then you go to an NFL team, and then you play through your NFL, career. And you have a bunch of different scenarios that can happen to you. You can, get cut, you can get traded, you cannot do good in the combine and fall down to the bottom of the draft. There's all kinds of things that can happen. So what we're going to do here on the football forecast, or what we're going to plan to do, is we're going to do a walkthrough or a gameplay series on this little mode in Madden, and kind of chop it up into little probably 30-minute segments, and just post one maybe once a day or once a week, however we want to do it at the time. But that's that's one idea of just stuff that we can post for you guys here on the football forecast. We have a lot of different ideas, such as player analysis, where we're going to break down plays that a player has ran, why a player is so good or why a player is so bad. Maybe a certain play, just taking, a play from an NFL game, especially during the season, if we see some kind of crazy play like, the catch or something like that, or a crazy kick or something. We'll have little, segments where we break that down and talk about it. Regularly I'll start taking segments from the podcast that I thought were funny or cool, and I'll post them on the football forecast for you guys. And yeah, all kinds of stuff. We're going to have a lot of content ideas, a lot of ideas to post. And things like that. And, overall, I want to do that because I want to build, like I said at the beginning, I want to build a community. I want to build a group of people that really do care about, what we're doing here, that love football, that want to see everything related to football, that want to see, SEC, just Southern football news, and, going into NFL, all football news, people that care about, all NFL teams, things like that. We're going to cover all football, every bit of it. We watch football like we watch the weather. We're going to cover literally everything, and we really hope you guys stick around and do that with us. Interact with us. Don't be afraid to leave any kind of suggestions or comments. We'll go ahead and talk about whatever you guys want. We're going to have a fun time here. I really hope you guys join us for the rest of this ride. And, so I guess that's it. If you have anything you want to say before we leave off.
I just want to say, people will probably look at our logo and see the name Football Forecast and probably kind of wonder what it's all about. And we're all about, particularly when the season gets to going, talking about the games, kind of predicting who's going to win, who's going to lose, what games to focus on, or what teams to look out for. And, of course, we're, all about analyzing the games after they've been played as well, and kind of talking about what happened and why. But one thing that we're also going to focus on when the games get started, that a lot of other sports shows, podcasts, and whatnot don't really talk about a lot, is the weather and how the weather will impact these games. Of course, football, because the majority of games are played outdoors. At a time of year that football season goes on, the weather can hugely impact a lot of these games. Where it be games played in the rain, snow. Particularly early in the season, you have a lot of games that are played in extreme heat. All that can affect team performance and possibly affect the outcome of games. So we'll, as we talk about different games, we'll also talk about how, weather might be a factor in some of these games when we're kind of dissecting them and taking a close look and trying to figure out what may happen on some of these.
Yeah, I thought that was a cool little segment to add, maybe in every, football forecast once the season starts, talking about that in every single game, like what the weather's going to look like in that part of the country, and see how it's going to go. And yeah, I think, relating to our name, Football Forecast, I think that's a cool little segment we could add, to the end of every podcast, or, in the middle, or whatever we want to do. So, yeah, I think that's cool. And, I think it just relates to our whole name, and, our logo there is a hurricane symbol, and I think that's a little cool theme that we could have going there, just, for fun, obviously being funny, but I mean, that is a real thing, relating that kind of situation to how, players play and things like that. So it is something that needs to be talked about, something cool, so a little cool segment that we can add. So yeah, I think that's a great idea. I hope you guys love everything that we're doing here. Like I said, anything you want to tell us about, anything like that, you can go ahead and let us know in the comments of this video. I'm going to have the Discord server posted up so you guys, or in the description, so you guys can click on it and join the Discord server. There you can message me or Steve or any other moderator or administrator inside the Discord server and ask us questions. Give us suggestions. We have a suggestion box there. We also have a chat box where you can talk to everybody in the community. And that's the goal. We want to grow that Discord server very, very heavily and just use it as our little community to talk to you guys and, leave suggestions, things like that. And if you're older and you don't really understand Discord, or you just never heard of Discord, basically what Discord is it's kind of like a little chat service, but it's based on a server. It's based on you have to join servers to interact and chat with people, and inside these servers there are different channels or chat rooms. Like there's text chat rooms where you can text, or there are voice chat rooms where you can talk to people with your voice using a microphone and things like that. And each chat room is different. We have one chat room which is going to be our draft room for when we do our fantasy football draft at the beginning of the season. So everybody's going to be chatting there. We're going to be like, okay, I just drafted Tom Brady, or I just drafted Pat Mahomes. We're going to be there talking about that. We're going to have a topic suggestion box where you can go in and text, and with everybody else, you can leave suggestions over what you want and things like that. So yeah, it's really easy to sign up and join. All you got to do is click the link in the description. You click on it. It should prompt you, if you don't have a Discord account already, to make an account. You make that account, and then once you make that account, it should automatically put you in the server, so you're there and you can talk to us. You can message us, leave suggestions, whatever you want to do. And if you have any questions about it, you can ask me. You can ask anybody in the Discord once you're in, or just leave a comment on YouTube. We'll be glad to help you. But yeah, it's definitely the number one way we want to grow our community is in Discord, because it's just easy to talk to everybody and get suggestions and things like that. So yeah, I guess that's it for today, this first episode of the football forecast. So yeah, thank you guys so much for tuning in and watching us today. We really hope you enjoyed, and we will see you next Tuesday, every single Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. Yeah. All right. We're going to go ahead and leave it there. I'll see you guys.